Hello and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Drax de Dupre. With me is not Joe. Joe is not with me, I should say. I don't know where she is. She's probably too busy in Berlin serving absinthe or schnapps or whatever. But maybe she didn't show up because today we actually are playing the audio from a little experiment of sorts that we did last week. The brand new Draxter Book Club, where we discussed the seminal 2006 novel Rainbow's End by Werner Vinge. I talk a little bit more about what goes on in that book a little later. Yes, it's a real book. And the concept of the book club is we meet in Second Life with interesting folks who actually read paper books and discuss this in front of a small audience. We met at the Pen in Bay City and with Fam Nutra and France Charming. This first show was just us three and virtually no audience because we didn't really publicize it. But that will change. So at the end of this show, I will announce the book we shall discuss in 5 weeks from today. And then hopefully a lot of people get to read, and then we'll all meet. And then we'll discuss this. We'll stream it on YouTube, and we'll discuss it on the show. And these are obviously books that are relevant to what we're into. Virtual worlds, virtual reality, maybe augmented reality. That's coming up as a fascinating discussion with people who have been in Second Life since, not maybe the very beginning, but who've seen a lot of things. They've seen things. After the housekeeping notes, you can get in touch with us, as you know. Ping the show's avatar Drax Files, send us news scoops, send us press releases, let us know what's happening. You can email radio@draxfiles.com. You can become a sponsor with us if you have a business. You can have your own banners displayed on the website and mentioned every single show. We have lots of great sponsors like Astro Boy. It's AZTRO Boy. He's a very talented young man from Mexico who loves this podcast and the video series so much that he decided to donate a portion of his SL revenue in order to make this show happen. Can you believe this? I think this is awesome, and I totally did not expect it, and he does not want us to make a big deal out of it, but you know what, Astro Boy? I am mentioning you because you're one of those people that make Second Life so special to me with your creative work, and we are putting a banner of your store up, and we'll put you in the credit list. Period. Done. Now, as you know, I started my own store, and when you buy from that store, what you do is also support this show and the Drax Files video series. And there's a new item, a fashionable t-shirt with an X-Files reference, that I think is very funny, with art by Arden Schwartzman based on original art by Nylon Pinkney. If you buy this shirt and take a picture and tag it, the Drax is out there, you can sleep like a baby because you supported the show. If you want to support us on an individual basis by taking out a voluntary subscription, it's $100 Linden per month. That's $25 Linden per show. Send us a message and we'll send you the subscription device made by Chris Lehman from Botanical. Now we'll get on with the show. After a little music break, we'll play Choo Choo again. They'll be on this show in May, and we'll talk in depth about how they got started in Second Life and how they sort of translated their Second Life success into quote-unquote real life success. I like to, of course, say physical world. Choo Choo is a duo from Japan, and this is a tune called In a Field of Snowdrops.
Today's technology, like I noticed.
All right, that was Choo Choo with In a Field of Snowdrops. And let's move right away to the recording of the Dragster Book Club. We discussed a book called Rainbow's End by Werner Winch. Came out in 2006. There is so much going on. So let me just set the scene. I got in touch with Fam Nutra, who's a longtime Second Lifer. He'll introduce himself in just a minute. And Franz Charming, who you may know from Nonprofit Commons. And another person, unfortunately, couldn't make it, Erewhon Yoshikawa, formerly Wump Linden. And the book Rainbow's End is basically kind of a conspiracy thriller starts with a big terrorist attack, and then it creates the scenario of a world in 2025 of augmented reality and virtual reality, basically completely ubiquitous. I think this is more important in its vision than Snow Crash and Ready Player One combined in many, many different ways, because it describes the impact that technology has, I think, better, more vividly. There's, for example, holograms are ubiquitous. So you can have people interact with people who are not there because they're holograms, and your contact lenses that you have, they put these people and with near perfection into the physical surroundings that you inhabit. So you have that, but then you have in the story what happens that these holograms are basically hijacked by other people. So these avatars, holograms, avatars, whatever, augmented avatars, get hijacked by another entity in the book. And so there are many, many different ways you can spy on people because everything is interconnected. The book is a lot about the Internet of Things. Everything has a chip in it. You can touch and feel things with different sort of wearable technology. So you have a haptic experience. There is the story of artificial intelligence that may or may not influence a lot of the ongoings in there. You have bioterror. You have governments that are sort of not oppressive, but they know pretty much everything you do. You have corporations that know everything you do. You have a corporation that wants to destroy every book. Joe, do you hear that? And scan them and create virtual versions of this book. The augmented reality technology that is described in the book basically enables everyone who wears those contact lenses to dial up a view of the world at their will in any way, shape, or form that is available. So you could make your surrounding look like you're in some sort of fantasy world. You can travel back in time just with the flick of a switch. Like I said, the story is a little convoluted, but ultimately satisfying. I think is very suspenseful. But the world that is being described is just incredibly enticing and at the same time, of course, dystopian. Anyway, maybe I should add that the story is being told from various perspectives, sort of a terrorist mastermind, but also a man who suffered from Alzheimer's, nearly died, and then came back through medical breakthroughs that basically cured Alzheimer's. But he has lost something that is important to him, which he may not be able to gain through technology alone. And he interacts with his granddaughter, and the granddaughter is all sort of plugged in. So the generational aspect, the challenges, or the conflict between the generations about how technology should be used in everyday life is a totally fascinating. It's not a subplot. It's really the red thread that goes through this all. And I think the author really doesn't take a position, which I think is super refreshing. But let's go to tape from the live broadcast. Here is Franz Charming introducing himself.
So, Franz Charming is my in-world name. I'm Jeroen Frans in real life. I've been in Second Life since 2005. In case somebody wonders about that. So, one of the things I do, I have like a development company for virtual worlds called the Fuchsius Group, which I co-own with two other people, with Joyce Beckencourt and Joshua Storts. And we develop, concentrate on education and non-profit clients developing virtual environments for them or experience.
And Fam Nutra here, who has been in Second Life, you're 11 years or 11 and a half years old, but you look fantastic. How do you do this?
You really don't have to emphasize so much that I had to went shopping yesterday, and because my avatar was so terribly outdated. But officially, let me say a few words about myself. I'm Nutra. In real life, I'm Markus Breuer. A few years ago, I think it must have been 8-9 years ago, I founded a company called the Otherland Group. We were trying to do what Franz is still doing, to be a kind of agency for projects in virtual worlds. At that time, we still envisioned that Second Life would not stay the only one, but as often in my life, when I was fascinated by new technology, I had the totally wrong timing, and the Second Life hype was going down, I think, half a year after we officially founded our company, and so we quickly ran out of funds, and I had to make money elsewhere. Traditionally, I'm more, you could say, IT guy. I founded 2 web development companies, and currently I'm an executive in a company doing, you could say, back-end work in online advertising. We are one of those people who always watch you and try to analyze what you're doing and predict what you're doing next. So we are really bad guys, but it's fun to be a bad guy.
You know what's interesting? I'm just typing it to Marianne to put the word out if we can get a little bit audience here also in World, which would be fun. Maybe they want to ask questions. And it's interesting that you mentioned sort of and we're all familiar with the shortcomings of this wonderful world. I say wonderful because I love it, and I'm in here every day, and there's amazing stories. But what you mentioned, Fam, is that the hype died for one of the reasons was that corporations that invested a lot of money really the technology was just not solid enough. And today we're gathered to discuss the book Rainbow's End. There's a little bit in there where the technology is pretty solid in that book, in that vision, and that's why it's being sort of used ubiquitously. So let me try to, or actually maybe you guys, I'll try to summarize it very quickly, and then I think I want you guys to tell me what you think this book is about. So Rainbow's End is a book by Werner Vinge, and it came out in 2006, and it plays in the year 2025, and there's a vision where augmented and virtual reality is so sort of ubiquitous that people can basically have their own overlays at will over reality. And there's also technology that's being described as, I think, touchy-feely, where there are ways where you have a tactile experience with basically the holograms that you incorporate in your view. So that's from the technology side. People wear contact lenses. They give you the view that you can sort of dial up. You can do a historic view. You can do sort of a fantasy view, meaning you could be in sort of your normal home, but then your dog could be, I guess, a dinosaur or whatever. And the technology works such that, as I understand it, as it's described, every item, just like the Internet of Things that is coming, has a chip in it, that a radio frequency chip that describes its location, and so the system can put overlays over the individual devices. I'm trying to be very short here. Now, of course, that's the technology that's being described. The contact lenses feed your visual, the visual information, and the computing power is inside the clothes that people wear. So that's where all the processing takes place, right?
And the cloth itself, like the shirt, is like the user interface. So
that's right. And they also use something that's interesting. There's a German company that works with high fidelity, and I don't want to get into we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the technology in a second. I don't want to be long-winded, but there's a German company that actually just announced collaboration with high fidelity, that they have eye track. The eyes, the focus of the eyes is basically the interface, and you can dial up menus in virtual reality. But the book describes an interesting proposition. The main hero is someone who almost died of Alzheimer's, but then was rescued and basically came back after a long coma, and is a little bit sort of out of this world because he just has to sort of learn from his granddaughter what the technological advances were. And he was a big shot poet, and he kind of lost his ability to write poetry. And that, to me, is the fascinating sort of thread through it, because the book itself talks about the importance of books. But anyway, that's my rambling of what this book is about. Franz, I'm going to time you. You have 2 minutes to pitch this book to start with, and then we get Fam a chance, and then we'll hand out prizes.
Okay,
who had the best summary. And go.
So, this is the book if you are really interested in what the future will bring, and especially if you're like into augmented reality and virtual reality. This book will like really drive your imagination of the possibilities on what you can do. It's a book it's from 2006. It talks about 2015. It's maybe nowadays we're a little bit too close by 25 to actually say to feel like that's not going to happen that quickly. But if you just imagine the years, like 10 years farther out, and suddenly things seems more reasonably. And like besides the virtual reality, like all the science is like you can what you can imagine from science fiction further along.
Why is the book important? Why is the book important?
It's important because it gives us a real insight of where our technology is heading, where or potentially is heading with the augmented reality and with the virtual reality. Like we might think that the Google glasses have flopped and we will never see it again, but there are other companies who are using that technology already, and with that use, we will get better iterations of it, and suddenly it will be back within the normal consumer market.
Okay, well, I want to bring Fam in now, and then we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk more. See, it's interesting, and this is not a criticism, friends, because I did the same thing. I threw around a lot of sort of technological advances that are depicted in the book, but I think I did a terrible job in sort of summarizing what is actually happening. Well, Fam, you get a chance to try to accomplish this impossible task. what is the book about, and what does it mean to you?
For me, this book is probably the best literary depiction of what virtual reality is about. It talks a lot about technologies, and if you read it, and I think you read it again a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I just finished
it's
it.
About a lot of it's about a lot of different technologies. It's about encryption, digital signage, and even biotech and so on. But the main storyline, and I certainly will not try to summarize it. It's quite a complicated, story, spy stuff, and personal stuff mixed. But there's one kind of red line going through the book, and this is really virtual reality. And I reread it last week to prepare a little bit for it, and I still remember one scene quite in the beginning of the book where this old guy coming back from Alzheimer's is visiting school again, where the children and the old guys are giving some tasks. They have to do a kind of performance, and of course all the children are doing it multimedia-like, with the capabilities of virtual reality and so on. But this old guy, all he does is to recite a poem, which he made up, I think, the day before.
That's right, he made it up. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and another protagonist, a young boy in the class, he listens to it. At first, it seems like a boring description of what was happening, and suddenly he realizes that more is happening, that he is really outside, that he is on the lawn, which the old guy is describing in his poem, that he is even able to kind of smell the lawn and so on. And I think this scene for me brings down the book to one point, that the human society, human people always tried to enter a virtual life, a virtual reality. Yeah, we do it today if we watch a movie, if we go into the cinema theater, and then if it's a good movie, it catches us. We really enter the story. If it's a good book, I can focus completely in a book, be immersed in it for a while. This was always possible. It was always possible to enter a virtual reality, and now we are doing it with technology, and technology is evolving really from a poem to something which covers your senses. And of course, it's easier to build this virtual reality in the mind of other people's if you can do it through sound and vision and totally control the sound of another person. And I think this sums up the technology in the book. This is the essence of what it is about, and all the rest is just details. And there's a lot of thoughts about it. A lot of thoughts which the author actually used for other novels too. For example, these positioning systems and the ideas of augmented intelligence, which goes through some of the line and so on. So if you want to know more about it, read other books by Werner Winch. He's quite an interesting and exciting author.
He's a physicist also, actually, at UC San Diego. Mathematician.
And what many people don't know anymore these days, actually he's a guy who coined the term technological singularity. This was not Kurzweil, but Werner Winch, and he used the idea in, I think, 3 or 4 of his novels too, that this technological singularity is happening really, and it's not that we all become Superman, but that society or humanity becomes something totally different, which no one who lived before can even understand. In 2 of his books, humanity disappears, and nobody knows, did all the people die or whatever? But this is a totally different topic.
Well, you could even say in this book that it is maybe just before the point of the technology singularity. It's like very close. Like the events in the story are the world's being manipulated, and at the end doesn't really know who did it.
Right, and we didn't even mention, and Franz, I'll get to you in a second, we didn't even mention that one of the big sort of stories also is or one big character is, and it's never really confirmed, but I think it's pretty clear, is an artificially intelligent being, although there are other theories.
Yeah.
I'll ask you guys what you think about it. To me, it's pretty clear, and I reread this with my son, and we just finished today, and for him it is completely clear that the mysterious stranger, Mr. Rabbit, is an artificially intelligent being that learns on the job, and so that's another fascinating thing. What you said, Fem, you, if I understood you correctly, and that's also what I got away with, is that this book makes a big case for how important books are as the quintessential piece of virtual reality, the non plus ultra of virtual reality. If we can sort of immerse ourselves in a book, we don't need fancy goggles.
When I was explaining Second Life to other people some 10 years ago, I typically talked about my fascination with it, that if you really sit in front of the computer screen and you only have this flat screen, you don't have goggles, you only see a picture, it's kind of laggy, the graphics quality is certainly not very good. It was even worse 10 years ago, but after half an hour or so being in Second Life, and especially interacting with other people, I really felt as if I was in a different world, as if I was a different person interacting with these people. And actually in my memory, even the graphics quality, the visual quality of this world was crazy great.
Yeah.
But, and then I left Second Life for maybe a few days, and I came back and I looked on my screen and I thought, what's all this shit about? This looks is my PC broken?
Yeah, we're probably sitting on a beach, and your imagination fills in all the missing parts, right? It's actual sand, palm trees looks exactly like palm trees in your mind, and then when you come back,
so we fill in those gaps.
Yeah, this was a kind of epiphany for me, I could call it, that this immersive effect can be achieved through many factors, and visual or audiovisual fidelity is just one aspect of it. But of course, if you want to drag people in, who don't invest so much enthusiasm or so much time, it is way more important. But if you let yourself in, if you allow this kind of immersive effect, you don't need a lot. You only need characters on a page or a poem you listen to, or an audiobook or whatever.
And trust me, Franz, I would now go into a ramble about that the acceptance of Second Life is a sign that we are going downhill as mankind, and we need more and more stimulation, and we're completely desensitized, and we need high fidelity goggles in order to feel anything. But I'm not going to do that right now.
What I want to say is
Franz,
that when thinking about this, like, there are also like people in my life that remembered, like, who never can get into a book. They never get that immersion from a book at all.
That's right.
Like the way I do or other people do. And so maybe the goggles for them are the thing to get immersion, or maybe they need something more even.
That's what I meant, and people have told me I sound like a terrible elitist when I say, well, you need goggles in order to feel anything. I can read, I can read Schopenhauer and I'm completely immersed. And they go like, you're an asshole, Drax. You're an elitist. Yeah. But Fem mentioned epiphany, and I want to just read a real quick excerpt here, because interestingly enough, the company that makes the contact lenses in the book and the whole technology, I guess sort of the monopoly of sort of the overlays that are offered in Rainbow's End that you can draw up at will, is Epiphany. So it seems to me, it's not, I think, completely explained, but I think they make the hardware and the software similar to Ready Player One that it's the company that makes both. It's interesting to read this book in the context of Second Life, where maybe Linden Lab would have been more successful if they had made the goggles plus the world, but obviously the technology wasn't there in 2003 when Second Life started. I want to read one page and then we'll go to the carry on with the conversation. This is a page 180 where Robert Gu, our hero, an older man who had Alzheimer's, almost died and came back and was completely healed, and now has to grapple with this all new technology that's all new to him, and he's playing around with his Epiphany device. Robert pushed away the mysteries and the fear and practiced with his Epiphany. Let's see the minimum adornment. Robert shrugged the familiar gesture. So I have to explain, you shrug and you make certain gestures and that triggers certain menu options. It's not only the what we mentioned earlier, that the eyes, when the eyes focus, then that brings up menus. Also there's a shrug that apparently brings up sort of a menu. Okay, he could see simple labeling. Everything, even the ice plant on the sides of the freeway, had little alphanumeric signs. Another shrug of the shoulder, and he was seeing what the objects he was passing, more accurately, the owners of the objects, wanted him to see. There was advertising. The malls had guessed he was an old fart and tuned their ads accordingly. But there was none of the outright spam of some earlier sessions. Maybe he finally had his filter set right. Robert leaned back from the window and reached out to wider universes. Colored maps appeared before his eyes. There were realities that were geographically far away, not overlaid upon San Diego at all. Those must be like the cyberspace crap of the 80s and 90s. Finally, he got a window that promised public local reality only. Oh yeah, only 200,000 of them for this part of San Diego County. He chose at random. Outside the car, the North County hillsides were swept clean of the subdivisions. The road had only 3 lanes, and the cars were out of the 1960s. He noticed the tag on the windshield of his car, now a Ford Falcon, San Diego Historical Society. Bit by bit, they were reconstructing the past. So that depicts him dialing up a historical view. I think that this is so an amazing excerpt from many reasons, because also, Fam, you mentioned earlier sort of advertising that never really worked in Second Life, and as we're going into a world almost that Werner Winch maybe is depicting here, there's some real smart advertising going on.
Yeah, as I said, there is a lot of stuff if you read the book, and a lot of aspects covered. For example, part of the story revolves about the idea of identity theft, which is a very much stronger concept if people interact virtually across distances, and you really can play someone else very visually believable. So it's much harder for people to get suspicious.
Right.
For example. So, as I said, there are these many aspects in the book where Werner Winch shows us, and I think that's a strong point in his writing anyway, how technologies really influence how people interact with each other, and how technology, if it's used in a broad way, influences society. Because...
No, go ahead. I was just... Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, and a few examples in the book, a few scenes, I think, storylines show this in an exemplary way, that this is not just a showcase for a kind of high-level virtual reality technology, but he is really thinking about what will it do with us. And the overlays which Robert Gu is seeing in the scene, they are similar to the experiments Google did with glass, where you can see some annotations on the faces of other people telling you who this is, and making it easier to enter small talk or never forget a name of people you met at a trade fair. Obviously advantages. But this already goes into the direction of this augmented intelligence, which is also a strong concept you will find in many of Vince's novels. And what he really does good, and that's why I said in the beginning that if you want to understand virtual reality and only have time, you don't want to read papers, read this book. Yeah, you might not grok the story completely. I find it quite winding.
Yeah, the story, that's true. It is a little, yeah. It could be.
He really shows you a society where a number of different technologies, especially virtual reality, is deeply ingrained. Yeah, and what this does to people. Yeah, to young people. Look at the granddaughter of Robert Gu. How they perceive the world in a totally different way. But even to people like him who are fresh to this kind of technology and how it changes their attitudes after a while. And this is really the strongest point of the book, to illustrate how this changes society. And I always, what can I say? I'm always amused about people who think that you can introduce technology which becomes really widespread without this changing interactions between people and the basic foundations of society, like the automobile, the car did before, or the telephone, or whatever.
There's so many things that I want to discuss. I want to mention real quick that the book and reading and the importance of libraries is one of the things that's the red thread throughout the book, which I find really important. At the very end, there's even a battle between the library and two belief circles, and it's about a company that shreds books and has a technology, has a device where you can basically shred books, to basically destroy the physical books in order to save money and space, and then scan those books while you're shredding them. And that technology in the book is sort of almost perfect. And the private company sells this sort of to the libraries, saying, you don't have money to maintain these physical libraries anymore. Come on, we're going to shred all your books, and then you have digital versions. Plus, you have a really cool way to dress up your books in your library in augmented reality. So if you like, you can have sort of a fantasy library with dragons and books flying around Harry Potter style, or you can have sort of a traditional library. So that's another aspect. So the imagination is amazing. But I want to ask you guys, though, because Fam, you said about changing technology. Now, what's the dystopian? Is there a dystopian angle about how the kids use it? I mean, you also have, I don't know how many children you have, Fam, but one of the things that I am really worried about is the balance here, because audiovisual entertainment is so ubiquitous. And in the book, the granddaughter Miri, I mean, she's completely versatile with wearing those contact lenses. She has it all figured out how to use it, and it has a positive spin on her life, I think. I mean, she's thriving in that environment, and she's not sort of zoning out vegetable style, just sort of having entertainment, the kind of dystopian thing. But what do you guys think about moving forward now? I mean, we live 2016. All the goggles are coming out this year. Augmented reality is said to be not quite there yet. HoloLens is $3,000, the dev kit. But certainly we're inching closer to this. So is there a possibility that culture goes to hell in a handbasket? Finally? Second Life didn't make us into all move back into our mom's basement, but maybe Oculus Rift will. Franz.
I don't know, maybe the moms are also going to move into basements.
Right, our moms will wear Oculus Rift 24/7 and zone out.
Yeah. Like when they retire, like put on the glasses on and like experience whatever they missed out on. So yeah, I don't like. There's always the danger of things being too immersive and being too addictive. That's the people are warned about or not.
Yeah,
I
but
think we're going to end up being humans and having to need to do human things, right? We need to have shelter and food, and we probably have to find some job to make sure we have that. And
I'm not sure if we need jobs. With automation, we might not need anything.
Well, if we get to that point, but we're talking about the headset right now coming out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're thinking further, somebody sneezed there. If you're thinking a bit further, then sure, like if things become completely automated, we might live a more life of more of leisure.
But my question
and
concerning with the book is that in the book it has a positive. It has the book depicts to me a dangerous world and bad guys and all that kind of stuff. But it also ends on a conciliatory note where we can all get along and we all have this balance, right? Because it is depicted that Robert Gu, who comes from this old world of reading and writing and really kind of sweating over a poem of just like 1 or 2 lines, really kind of going very deep, and he makes a presentation with his young colleague in school, and they are able to merge it all. Pham, do you think that we'll be able to do? I'm sometimes very pessimistic when I see the decline in social interactions, for example, with sort of a smartphone, right? I mean, now I sound like a real cultural pessimist, and I'm in Second Life, mind you, but I go to a family gathering and then people take out their phones. I think that's terrible.
I think it has 2 sides. If you look at the novel again, which is fair, I think, because we're here in a kind of book club, the way Werner Winch depicts it is that society basically adjusted to the new possibilities. And if a society adjusts to it, it's usually a good sign, or you can see it very prominently if you watch the children. And Miri, the granddaughter in the story, is a good example for it, because for her it's just natural. She's a kind of brat, a little bit bossy and so, but she interacts with her peers and with the other people in the story by different means, but the same way a clever child would do it today, on the same level. But I don't know if we will be able to achieve such a point where this is accepted and well integrated in society, because the big challenge, I think, on the way to singularity, and the reason for the singularity in the theories of the Kurzweils and Werner Winch himself, is that development and innovation accelerates. And in the past, human society typically had 1 or 2 generations to adjust to a dominant new technology. And we don't get this time anymore. And this makes things a little bit more complicated, and maybe that's where Winch is a little bit of an optimist. Because currently, if you introduce a basic new technology, it spreads relatively quickly, not as fast as we techno-optimists sometimes think, but maybe within a time frame of some 10 years. And 10 years is definitely not enough for society to adjust to it. Society typically needs 1 or 2 generations, and a generation is counted as 30 years, to really adjust it, to really grok it, and build new rituals around it and so on. So that's why I think he was a little bit optimistic. But basically, I think the ideas behind it are true. I have a 16-year-old son, and I'm divorced, and my ex-wife is a good example. She's very much afraid of his behavior when he's interacting with, you could say, new media. New media for her even includes the television. And it's funny because my ex-wife and me were both bookworms, and we both experienced our parents being very much worried that we spend so much time in our rooms reading books. And now we are worried that our children don't read enough books, but use another kind of medium to live in a virtual reality, to escape the real world for a while, like probably any pubescent child needs to do, because the world is a strange and not very nice place for them. Yeah, and for adults too, of course, but very much in this phase of your development. So I think what children are doing these days, it's more or less the same what we did, in my case, some 40 years ago, yeah, but with different means. And of course, it's more comfortable for them to do it with audio tapes, as was common maybe 20 years ago, or then with computer games, or these days with very advanced computer games, and maybe in 5 years, preferably by computer games working with virtual reality goggles.
I gotta jump in here. And I'm sorry, Franz, I know you want to say something, but I want to play devil's advocate real quick. I hear what you're saying, but isn't there a difference between committing to a book and sort of for an hour, let's just say we take an hour or two, committing to one book in a linear fashion, and on the other side, zipping across YouTube channels for let's say 2 minutes each, and then flipping on to the next. So what I'm saying is, I see a slight difference between the ubiquity of all the information at the same time versus committing to one book. That means, or to one record maybe even, right? I mean, you listen to that record over and over and over because you just don't have all those things. So my argument would be I would go deeper into it. So the experience of youth today might be very shallow because they zip around so much.
Yeah, I don't have kids myself, so I do have like a nephew and nieces. But I see what you're seeing, like they like constantly are flipping to different stations basically, or kind of content, but I also see them sometimes, like I know that when Minecraft is still like very popular, and they will watch like one Minecraft video after another, and then maybe play some Minecraft. That's basically similar to like reading like one book. So maybe the YouTube videos are short, but if they stick to like one type of content that they're watching,
good idea.
They get the depth out. Get the depth out of that, still out of it, because they are getting all these different views from different people about the thing they're passionate about.
Franz is making a good point. He's destroying my argument.
No,
that's a good point, because you're basically saying, okay, if like, let's say you get into Minecraft, let's say, then you seek out Minecraft videos, and they may be short, but you're doing a 2-hour Minecraft, so you're getting really deeply into the subject matter. That's a good point. Yeah.
I think there are two good points which could be made, and it's very hard to judge them objectively, in my opinion. First, I think that you might be idealizing your use or my own use 20, 30, 40 years ago, because not every child or youth at the time was consuming books, for example, as I did. That's one thing. I had many friends in school who would never read a book. The best they could do, or the most they could focus on a story, was watching an episode of some series on TV. So it's not generally that people were like me or were like you in the past. This is one thing. And maybe it has shifted. That even it became more shallow. I don't know, but many people, even I, sometimes was shallow at the time.
Yeah, you're making a thing. Go ahead.
The other thing is that children even today have the chance to get deeper. If I see how children interact with computer games, for example, and Minecraft is of course a very good example for it, but there are others. Even in more passive games, you could say, they get into the story, which is of course told in a very much different way, very deeply, very immersively. So it happens both. This very shallow surfing on the surface, just consuming content and then switching from one topic to the other very quickly, and this deep immersion where you really are engaged and not my son, but I experience this with some of his friends. They really make plans for creating things in Minecraft on paper even before, or doing notes when they try to achieve something in a first-person shooter and so on. So this intensity, it's still there. I don't know if it's as frequent as in the past or not, and I think it's very hard to measure that objectively. Yeah. But it's not all going down the road.
No, you're making.
May I ask something? Like, because we're talking about children and how if they are still getting deep diving into something intensely or not, or just shallowing, consuming everything. But I'm wondering, how are we ourselves behaving as adults in today's technology? Like I noticed many an evening where I Facebook and go from one article to another which have no connection to each other, only being on my timeline. Incredibly shallow.
Sherry Turkle from MIT she's on all the time on all different various shows. Sherry Turkle, who was once a big fan of, well, I shouldn't paint with this broader brush, but she is a very nuanced critic of technology, and she made she made a point in a talk show that I heard where she said the problem is actually not the kids or the young generation. Her research found that people between the age of 45 and 70 have much bigger problems adjusting to the technology, to the ubiquity of information. They have a less impulse control on average than young people. And when you think about this, it totally makes sense. The way she describes it is that basically I'm 46, so we're in that bracket. You're a little younger, I think, Franz, but the point is that we were not born with this technology. So for us, it's like we're being put in this candy land with this unlimited candy, and we can't control it. While the kids are like, yeah, this stuff is there. It's like the smorgasbord, and yeah, sure, I have my iPhone, but I have all these other things too. I have my soccer ball. So Sherry Turkle's argument is that we are essentially, our generation is afraid that the thing that kind of came, that it might also disappear at some point, and that's why we have more problems with balance and impulse control. Real quick, Pham, before I lose the thread, going back to the book, and Pham, thank you for making and Franz for being a little bit more nuanced. An anecdote from my own youth was I was reading Conan the Barbarian, and in my household of literature snobs, that was similar maybe to you, Pham. So it was not about me, disappearing with books. I disappeared with the wrong books, right? Because they were not good enough.
Yeah.
Same for me. I read what you would call in America a pulp fiction.
Exactly.
It had a different name in Germany, of course.
Schund.
But it was Schund literature, as we called it. So of course I couldn't get my parents, who were not from an intellectual background, but I could not get them excited about the stuff I was reading. It was not something where they could boast about their clever son about. But still, I think what made them most worried is that their children were not interacting with others enough, that they were not going out and stuff like that. But I found this focus you described coming from Sherry Turkle about their own fears being maybe projected to the children quite interesting, because I think this is, of course, something which makes people afraid the most, something new, which they don't know about themselves, and then especially how this might affect the children, because I think it's quite natural for us, even if we don't have children of our own, to be very protective of the next generation.
Right.
For example, that's one of the reasons why it might hurt the children, is such a powerful angle to get a political argument through.
That's right.
If you don't like something, and want to really persuade people to not like it too, you just have to hint that it might endanger the children. So I think it's fairly natural to focus your fears on the children. I'm not sure if it's realistic, but I think it happens with all of us.
Very good point. So we're throwing around the term singularity. Pham, can anybody kind of define singularity?
As a singularity, as a concept, is not that hard because it comes from mathematics. If you have a function which describes, for example, something which changes over time, the time is just one axis, and there is a certain point where this function behaves totally different from before. This is a definition of, or it's a layman's definition of a singularity. And what Werner Winch meant when he coined the term technological singularity is that technological progress accelerates. It can be shown in many diagrams or so that this really is the case. It accelerates with an exponential rate. We don't realize this because we are still in a kind of smooth area of the curve, but sometimes in the next 20, 30, 40 years, this rate of acceleration becomes so great that in theory new inventions will happen within days or so, and they will spread in society within days. Mm-hmm. If this is possible, it will be very disruptive. Disruptive is a much used term. It will be extremely disruptive to society.
The Onion had, I'm sorry, I gotta jump in here. The satirical newspaper, The Onion, had a headline a couple of days ago. Word disruptive at South by Southwest already uttered 650,000 times. Sorry, go ahead, Pham.
Exactly. And the main point describing technological singularity is probably that either by artificial intelligence, which some people think will happen, or by intelligence augmentation, like Werner Winch typically phrases it in his stories, there will be a point where there is some intelligent being which is 10 or 100 times as intelligent like a human being. This does not only mean that this being thinks faster than us, but it will think totally different. We are thinking totally different from even very clever animals. We can grasp concepts which these animals will never be able to handle, not even if you give them a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And so if there is much more intelligence in a being, it will be like that. They will think in totally different terms like us, and we will not know what happens then. What I find disgusting with the people behind Kurzweil is they only think, many times at least, that we will become super powerful or kind of eternally living beings.
Eternally living, that's kind of how it's reduced by them.
And that's bullshit, because we don't know how beings who are 100 times more intelligent than we, how they will think. Maybe they will desire to only live for a few minutes and then make room for even better ones. We don't know. And if this happens, our society or the society resulting will not be recognizable by us.
What we do see in the book is that there has been basically a large terrorist attack has happened in Chicago, which is alluded at like 10 years before the book. And afterwards, basically, all the Western government, and even the Chinese, are very friendly foods. They're working together, collaborating together. Even their some way, even their intelligence.
The intelligence services work together of all these different governments.
So, and that's of course a very, very positive view.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Yeah.
And it also means if they're all working together, that makes them very big brother.
Very big brother.
With very much power if none of them are competing.
Right, and again, I mean, we don't want to speculate what she meant. If we think about current discussions on marine areas,
that's what I wanted to ask you from. Titus, describe real quick what the book depicts and how does it tie in with what's happening right now.
Because while it's covering different aspects. In the book, I think the authorities, if we would call it like that, have a lot of power over all the systems, even down to our households. Yeah. So, in essence, I think in Rainbow's End, the authorities, have a kind of backdoor in every device. It's like something I think which was suggested about 10 years ago too, that all PCs which are sold should have a kind of controlled environment, that you only can install software which has a certificate and so on. And actually these certificates, the certificate tree plays a big role in the book too, in the
it's
end.
It's called Secure Hardware Environment.
Exactly. That was a name. I forgot the phrase.
Secure Hardware Environment, abbreviated SHE. Wow, it's sexist, that book. Sorry, go ahead. She is controlling everything.
Sorry, I think it stems from it's die Regierung, the government in Germany. So, and this is happening in the book, but I don't think that Finch necessarily thinks this is a good thing. It's just described as it happened, for different reasons. Franz described one, this terrorist attack and so on. And but of course, if you think about it in the terms of the current discussion, the new crypto wars starting these days, I think the world he describes is something many of us are afraid about these days. So of course you can criticize the book that it's not more political, that it doesn't try to describe a different world with more freedom about people, or that it doesn't describe the power of the governments to be such a big problem in everyday life. So this might be a justifiable criticism of the story, but I think it's not fair because it just describes a world where this happened.
All right, so that was the first of the Draxter Book Club, and with Fam Nutra and France Charming, Erewhon Yoshikawa. I hope that she will join us next time. On the blog, we have a few photos that were supplied by Justin Esparza, who also does a fabulous job with the thumbnail every single show, because Fam Nutra was part of the Linden Lab Second Views meeting that happened in the physical world, where prominent residents were invited to the Linden Lab headquarters, and there's some real cool sort of mixed reality photos there from the first Linden Lab headquarters actually there, and Fam Nutra in his physical form can be seen there. And you ask, how did Justin Esparza got these photos in 2006 at Linden Lab? Well, he was there, disguised as Salazar Jack. So there you go, there's a little history for you. Now, as you heard Fam Nutra mention, suggesting, we will be discussing the book Otherland. And there's 4 books, but we'll be discussing book 1, came out in 1996 by Tad Williams. And that's the book we will be discussing. And we will be meeting in Second Life to do this second iteration of the Draxter Book Club, hopefully with you, dear listener, and with a bunch of experts. And by experts, I mean people who read books. It's not that they have a PhD in science fiction literature. Just looked at the calendar. That will go down. You have plenty of time. This will go down May 5th. All right? So put that in the calendar. May 5th will be the day. That is a Thursday, where we will be discussing Otherland by Tad Williams. That's it for the show. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to pick up a I Want to Believe shirt, because you do want to believe. And here's another little piece of advice. Ignore GDC, Game Developers Conference. It's just all hype. VR will never make it. Yes, PlayStation VR is $3.99. I know it's tempting. Save the money and buy Draxter merch. And buy stuff from Adstorboy, okay? Next week, Joe will be back with another fascinating program. Fascinating guest. I don't want to give it away. But thanks for listening. That's it. And have a great weekend and goodbye.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Extraordinary Fine Magical Goods, Ionic, Maven Homes, Gizzo Creations, Botanical, Strawberry Sing, Humanoid Animations, Abranimations, Eros Avatars, Caravel Design, The Cube Republic, the Avazines Publication Family, What Next, Dutchy Furniture, Landscapes Unlimited, Bay Cities You Know for Kids, Dwarfins, Fallen Gods Incorporated, Feroce SL, and Death Row Designs. Contact the show via Skype, DraxFiles, Avatar DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.